So my first question to you is, when you talk about rights being able to be taken away or being enforced by men, what type of rights are you talking about? Are you talking about natural rights, or are you talking about human rights?
What do you think the distinction between the two are?
I'm asking you.
Well, are these physical? So I don't, any right that you would consider to be something which is physical from a secular framework, I would consider those to be right. Whether you call them natural rights or you call them whatever you want, it doesn't matter from my perspective.
Okay, but what I'm saying, what do you consider rights, right, that can be enforced and that can also be taken away if men collectivize?
Well, so I would make the distinction in two ways. The first would be an unalienable right. So if you look at the framing around our Constitution, there's only 3 unalienable rights. So the unalienable right would be a right which cannot be taken away under any circumstances. So the 3 unalienable rights would be the right to liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and what's the other one? It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So those would be unalienable rights. So everything else would be a negative right in the Constitution, or the way that we at least perceive rights. So none of them are positive rights; they're all affirmed in the negative, meaning you can't do X. It's not a positive of what you must do or should do as a right, but rather it's a restriction on what you can't do, that type of thing.
So what would you say then? Where would you say the your definition of your rights? Where do you believe that comes from?
I don't think we have rights.
Well, you just got done explaining inalienable rights, right? The ones we were talking about enforcing and being able to be taken away. Where does that come from?
These are conceptualizations, though. Right? I'm
But
just giving you conceptualizations, not what I believe.
We actually have laws that
just stop. Hang on.
Don't tell me to stop.
I need you to understand. Well, I need you to understand my position before you ask the question, because I'm answering the question. So what I'm giving you is a conceptualization of what an unalienable right is. Doesn't mean I believe they exist. It just means that I'm telling you what they are. And then I'm telling you what a negative right is. I'm not saying that those things actually exist. They're all social constructions from my perspective. They're socially constructed. They don't actually exist in physical reality. They're made the fuck up.
If they don't exist in physical reality, how can people enforce it?
They're enforcing a social construction. So the person exists in physical reality. The other person exists in physical reality. But whatever the conceptualization is of what you want to enforce does not exist as some physical metric. So you can't, like, for instance, I can't point out a right. I can't point to it or taste it or smell it or touch it or any of those things. They don't actually exist outside of your own brain. They're just conceptualizations of things.
I'm so all right, so you're saying rights don't exist outside of your own brain, but yet in the physical world where rights are actually important, and in your argument, actually in the previous argument that you mentioned, can be enforced, and also if men in your hypothetical world were to collectivize, can be taken away, you're also making the same argument that those rights just exist in people's heads and there's no real world consequences towards that.
There's no performative contradiction between the two. So if you have a conceptualization that something is a right, you conceptualize that this is true, even if it's not. How
about we don't conceptualize it? Let's just look at the rights right now.
Because it's a concept. It's a concept.
Constitution in your last example, right? We're talking about inalienable rights. Let's talk about that. Because
if you don't want me to conceptualize it,
it's a legal document that exists. So it's not something that is in your head. It's actually written down, and we've been following those laws,
bro. If you don't want me to conceptualize, okay, if you don't want me to conceptualize it, then point to where one is. Point to a right. Okay. What does a right smell? What does a right smell like? What does the Second Amendment smell? What does the Second Amendment smell like? What does it look like? What does it taste like? What, you can't point to it. It's just a conceptualization of a thing,
no, you
right?
Can point to it. There's a
well, then point to it.
Printed thousands of times that basically says, "Hey, this is what your rights are." And guess what? There's enforcement mechanisms put in place to enforce that document. So you're saying that's just a concept to you?
The piece of paper is real. You would agree. I would agree with you. The piece of paper and the ink and everything else, those are all physical things. But the rights, which are enshrined on that piece of paper, those are conceptualizations. They don't exist. You understand that? They don't actually exist. A right doesn't actually exist. If it does, show me where it is. It's just a social construction. They're made up. They're made the fuck up, dude. Made up.
So here's the thing, because you're okay. So you're. This is where you're going with this, and it's actually kind of interesting that you're taking this route, right? Because I understand where you're coming from. You're saying it's something that we conjure up. It's a concept, all right. It's one of those things where it comes from our minds. We put it out there, but at the end of the day, it's just a concept. You can't point to a right. You can't point to a thing. But again, these are the same things that have very real world consequences, whether it's human rights or whether it's natural rights. These are very things that affect people in the real world. Societies build structures and systems around these certain rights, all right, especially the ones that you consider inalienable, even the same one you use as an argument when you talk about enforcement mechanisms being the men, all right? So how can men enforce something that doesn't exist? How can they point to something and say, all right, well, that does, like, you understand how you're taking it from your conceptualized world and it doesn't make sense in reality. You understand that, right? There's two different things. So I'm talking about reality here, rights, not concepts.
Yeah, so but hang on. But in reality, they're in reality, they're just concepts. You can afford societies and structure societies based around concepts. We do it all the time. Social constructions, especially, for instance, take a school. A school isn't anything other than a building where people go to learn. What makes it a school? What makes it a school is that we call it a school. Right? Yeah. Well, no, that's not what makes it a school. A school is still a school, even if there's no people in it.
The structures of the school, right?
Right. So it's all.
You have the teachers, you have the janitorial staffs, you even have the students to make it all work. So at the end of the day, this empty building, for instance, can be repurposed to anything else.
Let me finish.
At the end of the day, time out. At the end of the day, it's the people that make it up, right? They build the institution and the system that turns it into a school. The exact same people that build up the system, all right, from a fictional conceptual document that you want to call the Constitution, and as long as those people abide by those document, it becomes real. So in your other argument,
no, it's not real.
Okay.
So backing up,
back to concepts again.
Well, that's all school is it's a conceptualization of a thing that we call a learning center.
Education is just a concept.
Let me finish a sentence, dude. I let you talk and express whatever you wanted. Let me at least respond before you cut in. So try to understand that what you're talking about is a conceptualization which is applied. Morals operate this way. Almost everything in your life operates around social constructions for normalcy. A stop sign is a social construct, right? There's a physical sign there, but the fact you're supposed to stop there is socially constructed. It's made up. It's not actual reality that you must stop at a stop sign. You just do because you operate as though it's reality. So when you're saying, hey, let me finish, man. So when you're saying, hey, these things are applied to reality, they map onto reality, I agree with you. That's how we talk about concepts. So I'm willing to engage with the concepts being applied to reality, but you need to first start with these are just concepts and they don't actually exist physically anywhere.
No, I can't start with that premise because that doesn't make any sense. Though to me, from everyone else's standpoint, even you're using an example of the stop sign. Okay, yeah, I get it. What does anything really actually mean, right? Unless there were certain laws assigned or governed to it, just like anything else. So the stop sign, it's a pact that we sign with the laws of the society we're currently living in that said, hey, if you see a stop sign, you stop, because if you don't, well, guess what? You're more likely to cause physical harm to other people that exist. So it becomes a real thing.
It's still a concept. It's conceptual.
Okay, listen, I understand the concept you're talking about, but when you bring it to reality, they have real world consequences. So we can't be arguing, okay, well, it's a stop sign, it's a law, it can mean anything or it cannot mean anything. It doesn't, you can't really point to it, but at the end of the day, they still affect people in a very real way, real, tangible, and practically effective.
Yeah, but so what? So saying that a conceptualization can map on reality based on you behaving as though it's real, I've already conceded must be true. It's the only logical way that can be true.
So it is true.
Are you listening to what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just heard what you just said.
So then you have to start with the presupposition that these are concepts, which you just categorically rejected. So you need to say these are just concepts. Concepts. They're not real. These aren't real.
But they have real world consequences. That's what you're not understanding. You're bringing it back to concepts.
No, something that doesn't exist has no real world consequence.
It's a real enough document that it's governing a whole country, and in relations to other countries that it's real enough. It's no longer a concept. You don't need to conceptualize the concept.
No, it's still a concept.
It's there. You don't even need to, even when it comes
No,
down
you still
to,
need to conceptualize it. You still have to conceptualize the rights.
Explain
well,
how.
Because they don't exist in physical reality, dude. What are you not getting about this? None of these conceptualizations.
Do you believe that even before the concept of good and evil or right or wrong, do you believe that people just didn't know the difference?
What? That's a total non sequitur. What does that have to do with anything?
No. I'm getting to a point though. Because
what's the point?
The point is, no matter what, even if it's in your head, you're talking about what's the concept of right, what's the concept of wrong. Realistically, we all know there's a natural a law that lets us know that there's something good and there's something bad. The natural law of justice and injustice, moral or immoral or unmoral, whatever the fuck you want to call it, right? So those things are something that you classify around human law, human what do you call it? Human nature or human rights, right? Because we all kind of know that stuff already to begin with. So you can call that a concept, you can call it whatever it is, but even though you want to categorize that as concepts, they still have real world consequences to how human govern. So for instance, someone who wakes up isn't going to just go murder their parents because they know that's bad. Now, are you going to say there are people that do that in the real world? No, there are people that do that, but the vast majority of people understand the morals. So even if they're concepts, which I don't deny, they are concepts, they have real world consequences. And I'm talking about the real world where you're trying to bring it back to the concepts.
So again, you can act in such a way as though a thing which you conceptualize is real, and that will create consequences. But the consequences are coming from the things in physical reality, in this case, human beings acting on those conceptualizations, the conceptualizations of rights, the conceptualization that that's a school, the conceptualization this is private property. All of these things are conceptualized, but they don't exist in tangible physical reality. So what you're really talking about is human behavior. And I agree that human behavior has direct impacts on other human beings based on however you conceptualize why they're behaving that way, what they're behaving that way for, what they're going to do in the future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We all operate on, I think the conceptualizations are necessary and social constructions are necessary for us to live, but that doesn't mean that they exist in reality. So when we're talking about rights, try to understand my position here, which what I'm trying to flesh out is that rights themselves don't exist. Acting as though that they do, I think we can do. And sure, that gives us some impact because of human behavior, but rights themselves don't even exist. They just don't exist. So we're talking in abstracts here. When you say, can you take these rights? When you say, can you take these rights away from these people? It's like, I don't know that they have rights to begin with, especially not unalienable rights, meaning they can't be taken away. That seems paradoxical to me.